Maybe you can say even.
The other thing you want to do when you're presenting to the vet, when you're taking their pulse, you want to be quiet. You want your pulse to be quiet, and you want to stay out of the
It's 12 in another minute. Yeah, when you get into your pulse area, no matter if you're LD comp or whatever, the way to lose friends is to talk real loud, make a lot of commotion, because in that area they want everybody calming down, everything quiet, because it does. I mean, one beat can make a difference. In competitive,
Right. You can't leave the ride until they're under.
Oh, no, well, they can't leave.
in competitive, a lot of times you'll see people
Okay.
they'll kind of get their horse used to having like an arm over his neck and get him to kind of come down and quiet. And those horses learn that, okay, we're here to chill. This is the part where we chill, and just to keep them focused on here, so they don't have their head up looking around.
And one thing Julie does is kneels in front of her horses.
Yeah, I'll do this to get their head down, because their head's down.
Everybody has their own method of what they do.
That'll drop their heart rate. I have Ace over there, you'll see the difference. His heart rate's gonna be a lot higher than these guys, because he's a more nervous horse. So you just have to manage him differently.
So what decides when you take the pulse again? I mean, like if
If
you
you're-
say every minute take it.
Well,
and the vet's
we're
saying,
doing that now,
"I got other people."
right, you go into a pulse box, there'll be an area ribboned off, and when you think your horse is down, you take him in. And, sometimes your horse goes back up because there's a stallion, or there's commotion, they're nervous, so the vet says, you're at 64, out of here. So then you can walk out of the box, go right back in. Yeah, if there's a line, you have to go behind the line. The other thing is, LDs can get limited distance can get pretty competitive in that 3 people might come into the pulse box at the same time. When you're ready, you say call or pulse time. You have to call it, because it might be me, Linda, and Marty, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to say call. So I get checked first.
And it depends on how many pulse, there might be one pulse taker. Hopefully there's more.
Usually there's more.
But the other thing is you don't want your horse a 72 when you walk into the pulse box and he's supposed to be 60. Like,
But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you could be a real jerk and just consistently doing it.
yeah.
But
the vet-
the vets aren't coming to you, you're going to the vet.
Yeah.
So you still have to get in line.
You can
And
only
sometimes the vet-
pulse twice, is it?
No.
Depends on the vet.
Yeah.
Some vets make that rule.
Right.
They'll say it depends on the vet and the rules that they establish. Sometimes they'll say you can only present twice. But typically that's not the case.
Yeah. And so that's why it's a good idea to buy a stethoscope, so you can check your horse before you go up. And if you don't have one, you can ask somebody else to do it. A lot of times you'll say, Jen, can you help me?
There's always that person in the pulse box.
Yeah.
All right. Are you able to lower the head during the actual pulse?
So try not to make them move at all.
Okay, he stayed at a 13. But the whole time he was rubbing his head, he moved around. So this would be, and he's young. I mean, these are both really young horses. So he just hasn't figured out that, and you've got a group of people, that this is the time to chill. And it's not a overexerted 13, it's a unnervous 13. This one came down to a 12.
I say,
I
they
mean,
both,
10, excuse me, he came down to a 10, I'm sorry.
they both have finished. Even the 13 would have finished.
Right.
Because you have to have 15.
So Chris, will you trot your horse out? Because this, at the end, you're still going to go through all that criteria we did at the beginning. They still have to pass all of that. This is Foxy, and this is Memphis. See, we've never asked her to trot out. She's doing really well, but she's a real sparkly little horse. Okay, you want to trot out, Amanda?
And they're both young horses, and that's why we pulled that down. They're both a little hesitant to trot. And whereas Nitro came down, he was kind of arched up looking at us like, let's go. Okay, so that's another thing that needs to be practiced. So even when you get to camp and they're nervous and stuff, practice trotting them by your trailer, around the group and stuff, because it's all a matter of them just getting used to it.
And I want to point something out, not to pick on Amanda, but, you know, Memphis hasn't done a ride yet, and Amanda was in front of him and kind of pulling on him because he didn't quite know what to do. And that's just a lack of practice on Memphis because it doesn't make, it makes the horse look worse. I can't run very fast. Well, you can see the difference between him and Nitro.
At an end of a ride, like you say, his horse just came in on a 15, he did that, they may construe that as a fatigue.
Yeah,
He
too
just
tired.
doesn't want to go anymore. That's how that could be interpreted.
But we, he just doesn't know.
He doesn't know what he does. No.
So trained to, a lot of people, right, and I teach them the word trot. Yeah. So other people click, you know, it's good to have a set command so your horse knows.
And it also does you no favors if your horse drags you through the vet end
Yeah.
and then trots politely beside you when you're done. They look like a different horse.
Yeah.
Okay, those guys can get coolers on them and.
Any questions about that respiration?
There's a purple one right there and there's a red one in the tack room. Everything else is being used on people right now.
Any questions on your trot outs, ways to practice at home?
For LD, we'll do comp.
We're gonna be doing a little practicing too after we get through this. Do we wanna do comp now?
Yep.
Okay.
Different score sheet comp.
More complicated. Oh, and we have some used ones. Yes. What do we think we wanted them for, so they can actually see
See one filled out.
This is if you're doing a 25.
This says a 25, yeah. And competitive. And you'll come in to the vet check,
We have some other things to talk about.
and somebody will hand you one of these cards as you come into the timer. They'll give you one of these cards, and your rider number will be at the top of the card. And, whoops, sorry, Jen. You don't need one of these.
No.
The rider number will be at the top of the card. If it's a multiple check, like it's a very long event, you might have check 1, 2, 3, or finish. And the timer will put in the time you came in to whatever the vet check is, and then the clock will start. 10 minutes after you've crossed that line,
They also write that on there, don't they?
yeah, it's time in, where it says time in.
Okay.
And then time for vet check, that'll be whatever, time in plus 10 minutes. You'll be directed someplace, and that's when you stand in quietly with your horse, trying to get your horse to calm down, get the pulse down, get the respiration down. At 10 minutes, somebody will say time, and they'll go up and they'll start checking your horse for pulse and respiration. So that happened at a vet check and at the end of the ride.
So did you all get that? In comp, there's 10 minutes between the time you come in and the time the vet takes pulse and respiration.
You're regardless of whether your horses are already at a good level.
It's
10 minutes.
mandatory 10 minutes.
10 minutes. It's because they want to be able to compare the horses, and they try to do it at the exact same time. So you all, whoever came in together, let's say there's 5 people that came in together. And there's strategy to this, and we'll talk about that when we get to the crewing. We'll talk about crewing and how you crew. But you'll stand together and get your horse as calm as possible, do whatever strategy you need to do to get your horse calm and get their pulse as low as possible. And exactly 10 minutes afterwards, a group of people will come by and try to take their pulse and respiration almost at the exact same time. They try to do them as close together as possible. so they can have a fair comparison between the horses.
But it's always 10 minutes after you cross the finish line coming in. So if, like somebody said they wanted to ride by themselves,
Yeah.
there could be somebody that breaks off from the group and is maybe 5 minutes behind the group. Theirs will be 10 minutes after they cross the finish line. And you notice that like Linda got like a 13.3 on that one horse. That would be written down here. If somebody thinks it's wrong, they may ask for a recheck, and it could be done again. But the second time it's done, that's the one that counts. So if there's a 13.3 and you ask for a recheck and it's a 14.3, it's going to be the 14.3 that gets reported. Then what happens if you go back to this, you can see this little table here. Somebody will take the cards, translate what the pulse and respiration is into the points, and then write it down on here, on the score sheet.
You don't do that.
Because you're really too tired to do math at that point.
Yeah.
So.
All you have to do is turn in your card.
But you know, that's a question I have, for the rider, are you allowed to have food on the trailer?
Oh, absolutely. We'll talk about crewing and all, yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
that's what you mean, okay.
Yeah,
Basically,
absolutely.
you're gonna come in, cross the line. The timer will be there, you're gonna get a card. You're gonna be directed to the pulse area as a group. You're gonna go there, you're gonna wait for 10 minutes. They're gonna check your pulse and respiration. From there, you can go to your trailer, you can have a spot set up if your trailer's a long ways away, and go to that area. And there'll be an out time on the bottom of your card. Keep this card while you're in camp, don't lose it. And then when your out time comes, you are responsible to go to the timer, turn in your card, and go back out on trail. Okay? But during that time between the P&R check and your out time, you could eat, go to the bathroom, take the saddle off your horse. You cannot use water on him. You cannot put ice boots on him. It's all natural. But that'll be your protocol on that. Another thing, when you are in a group and say there's a lot of horses having their pulse and respiration taken, it's an unwritten courtesy that if the horse right behind you is having his pulse taken, that you would just wait until he's done. Because as you walk off with your horse, he's going to go, I want to go too, his heart rate might go up or whatever. So I don't think it's really a rule, but it is definitely a courtesy that everybody really appreciates. So that'll be your vet check area.
The other thing that we didn't mention, I'm sorry,
They may have you do a language at that time also, when you come in for a vet check. I'm sorry. So you may go from pulse respiration, you may be directed to go over and do a trot-out.
typically you would have
Yeah,
to.
And it'll probably just be an check, it won't be circles, hit the midpoints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that reminded me, we didn't talk about the beginning of a ride. We're talking about the middle and the end, and we didn't talk about the beginning of a ride. Because everybody has to be present at the time your ride starts. And they'll start at different times. Like, let's say, endurance will start at 6, LD will start at 6:30, and comp will start at 7, okay? There's a timer at the ride, and they'll tell you where that timer is. They'll usually be under some kind of tent or something to keep them out of the sun all day long. And what you have to do is before the time your ride goes out, you need to check in with the timer. And just say, your horse will have a number on it. We didn't talk about giving numbers. When you vet in, they'll put a number on the back of your, well, actually, when you check in, they'll assign you a number. The ride management will assign you a number, your horse a number. And then when you vet in, someone, typically the scribe or someone, will put that number on your horse, okay? Then, once everybody's checked in, we take a list of everybody that's competing, let's say in comp, to the timer. And then all the riders before 7 o'clock, since all comp squad at 7, sometime before 7, you go up to the timer and you say, I'm here, I'm number 64 and I'm here. And that doesn't mean you have to go out. Except with comp. Comp typically people go out together. But you don't have to go out at the exact time the ride starts, but you have to be present at the time the ride starts, and you have to check in with the timer. I guess that
Seems like a lot. When you get
People
to a
are
ride,
gonna
don't worry, just raise the flag and say, okay, I'm new here, and yeah.
And you'll get all kinds of advice. More than you ever wanted.
It really isn't, it sounds complicated right now, but it really isn't as
But they
complicated.
normally have like pre-ride meetings or.
Yes, they do. The evening before or the morning of, and sometimes both. Typically, there'll be a pre-ride meeting or riders meeting, and they'll go over all this information again. They'll say, this is where the timer is, this is where the vet check area is, this is where you can set up your crew, stuff for your crewing. They'll go over the trail and which colored ribbons you follow for which loop of the trail, and they go over all of that.
Are there, like, say, for example, Jubilee, you guys have a competition at Jubilee, are there other riders at that time?
Yes,
There can be.
Normally, the park management tries to kind of give people a heads up, say there will be a competition here, and a lot of people then go, I'll go somewhere else, but not always.
And the other thing that you'll see out on trail, in addition to what we call day riders or recreational riders, and we always want to be very nice to them. So if you're trotting along and you come upon a day rider, bring your horse back to a walk, or if you come up and someone's in front of you, you say, I'm behind, is it okay if I pass? Try to pass at a walk. We try to be very, very courteous.
And safe. You're as safe as possible.
Yeah. And there are bicycles on the trail, and also there's people driving with carts. So it's good to get and on some of the rides, there's ATVs. Hikers with big backpacks that stick up here. My horse just pooped it right out. So the more
If one cue is if there are people on the trail, especially if they're on a bike or something, and they pulled over to let you pass, which they commonly do, they're very nice. And the horse still acts like, I'm not going there. Have them talk, have them just say something, and usually once the horse hears a human voice, he's okay. So that's just a little trick to maybe get by. Or even the person in the cart, if they'll kind of talk to your horse a little bit, it does help a little bit.
Yeah, it does. And the carts are very good too. They are used to this, and they'll stop their horse and try to get to the side until your horse goes by. So people really try to help one another, and that is really true about this sport. Everybody helps everybody else out on the trail, even if you're competing against someone else. If there's something going on and someone needs help, everybody stops and helps.